My name is Aaron White. I am the son of the head pastor here at New Covenant Fellowship. I currently go to a Bible college up in North Dakota called Trinity Bible College. I've always grown up in church. Again, my dad's pastor here, so my life has always been centered around being in church. One of my earliest memories is the first time we lived in Charles City. I was sneaking around as a little kid, as my dad was doing. He was the youth pastor at that time at a little church, a little Lutheran church, I believe, or just a little church in Charles City. And I was sneaking around to try and steal some candy from the teenagers. He told me, and I actually remember this myself, of when he was first reading the Gospels to us, that when he told us that Jesus died, my brother and my sister and I, we all broke down crying, because how would someone die for someone they don't know? Why would someone do that for us? We just were like desperately trying to comprehend why this person would die for us, like what the implications were. Even though we were little kids, we understood the concept of death, and we understood that this was crazy. That someone was tortured and beaten for me so that I can have a relationship with God. And as a little kid, I just remember being I remember being told that as a little kid I had a great relationship with God, and that I was living my life for God and living my life as an act of worship towards Him. So everything started kind of going bad around middle school, I would say. Middle school, I was starting to hit puberty finally, a bit later than all the other guys, and I didn't know who I was, and that was when I first started struggling with depression and anxiety. That was when I first started seeing that, hey, life isn't always great, and being like a pubescent boy, I was also trying to challenge what I had grown up with and trying to find who I was. And that transferred on into high school, where I found myself being hypersexual. I found myself falling headfirst into drugs, selling drugs, distributing, taking as much as I possibly could just to hide the fact that I wasn't happy, I was high. I stopped being happy, my depression got worse and worse, my anxiety got worse and worse, and I was starting to self-sabotage, because any happy moments always had to come down at the end, because that was what I was used to. I was used to being high, and the feeling, the euphoric feeling that you get whenever you're high, there's always a come down at the end, and that come down is the worst possible thing, because I'm back in reality, getting high every single day for the last 2 years of high school, just so that I could not actually live in the real world, but I could live in the world that was falsely being formed inside of my head. So things didn't actually start changing for me until I graduated high school. If I remember correctly, it was August 16th, 2016. I went to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to a missionary organization called Youth at the Mission. And that first night there, the first day, I was given a tour around campus, and I went back to my room, and there was one exchange student there from Germany, Severin, really good friends with him. But at this time, he couldn't speak very much English, and his German accent was crazy thick, so I couldn't understand him, and after 5 minutes of him and I trying to talk, we were just like, no. And he went back to his bed, and we didn't talk for probably a week, until he kind of stopped having a super thick German accent. But that night, I was just laying in my bed, just thinking about how I was going to do things here, what mask I was going to put on to make everyone like me, because that's, I try and make people like me. Then all of a sudden I had this overwhelming feeling of being loved, of being accepted, and just knowing that like God's there and God's holding me. And I broke down and I cried. I cried for a solid 2 hours, which isn't normal for me because I generally don't cry. So I was crying and bawling, and thankfully Severin didn't ask me why, because that would have been awkward. But I was crying in my pillow for 2 hours that night because I had just figured out that there was a God. I had just figured out that I was loved and I was accepted. I had just found that I could actually find my identity in the living God. That He calls me a man not because of what I do, not because of the women that I'm with. He doesn't call me a man because I can do drugs and I can drink alcohol. He doesn't call me a man because of that. He calls me a man, He calls me His son because I am, and He is. And that's all that's really important. So, first and foremost, the thing that really got me, I guess, hooked on God was I found out that God works. God's real, God's active. He's not some God who's far away, who's distant, who doesn't really care. God works and He makes Himself known, He makes Himself relational. And the way that affected me personally was instant. So, the moment I felt God and the moment that God really touched me, at YWAM, August 16th, 2016, my depression just kind of dissipated. I wasn't depressed. I didn't need to have supplements for being happy. I was just content and happy with who I am and what I'm doing. God gave me an identity. Like I said, I'm the son of the living God. He gave me that identity, and that's who I am, and that's where I find myself. That's what I base myself off of. That's what I do. I'm the son of the living God. That's where I find myself, how I find myself. So He gave me an identity. He gave me a place. He gave me reference points to do everything I can from. Honestly, the biggest thing for me was finding this identity, finding that I was and I am the son of the living God. I'm not some drug addict. I'm not a guy who's constantly looking for the next girl. I'm not a guy who's constantly looking for alcohol or anything substance-wise just to make me happy. I'm not seeking things for myself. I'm the son of the living God. And that was so important for me because I was able to find who I am. I was able to find why I matter. I was able to find what my actual purpose in life is. How do I live this life? What do I do? And all these things, all these giant questions that people ask on a daily, what I ask someone, daily, was easily found in just knowing that I'm the son of the living God. That everything that I do needs to reflect and should reflect God, Jesus. Because that's who I am, that's where I come from, that's my identity. That's what I know. That's all I really need to know.